Hello and welcome to the Fast DAF, Koren Talmud Bavli. I'm reciting it, adding a wealth of interesting information out there. It's now 10:49 Israel time in the morning, and this DAF is going to end by before 10:19. And here we go. We're starting at the end of DAF Bet Amud Bet, where it says, Rabbi Yehuda ben Beter Omer, B'sheni b'chag hu mazkir my taima de Rabbi Yehuda ben Betera, the Tanya. Rabbi Yehuda ben Betera Omer, Nemar b'sheni v'niskehem, v'nemar b'shishi v'niskehem, v'nemar b'shvi'i k'mishpatam. Hare mem yud kan mayim. Mikan remez l'nisuch mayim min. Now, in English, the Breita states that Rabbi Yehuda ben Betera says on the second day of the festival of Sukkot, one begins to mention rain. So the Gemara asks, what is the reason for this ruling of Rabbi Yehuda ben Betera? The Gemara answers, as it is taught in the Breita that deals with the source for the water libations on Sukkot, that Rabbi Yehuda ben Betera says the following. Okay, before we say that, we'll say that the Torah alludes to the water libation in its description of the libation of the additional offerings of Sukkot. So the Torah uses a slightly different term for the libations of certain days. On most days it says that the sin offering must be brought with, quote, its libation, the nisach, end quote, such as in Numbers 29, in the singular form. So by contrast, Rabbi Yehuda ben Betera says it is stated on the second day that one must offer their libation, the niskehem, their libations in the plural. The plural form indicates the presence of multiple offerings. And furthermore, it is stated concerning the sin offering libations on the sixth day and its libations, unesacheha, also plural. And so that's meaning many libations. And finally, it's stated with regards to the libations of the musaf offering on the seventh day that they must apportion the respective animals, meaning oxen, rams, and sheep, according to their laws, kamishpatam, using another plural form, which is different from the phrase used on the other festival days when it says in the singular, kamishpat. Hare mem yud mem, hare kan mayim, mem yud mem, mikan remez l'nisuch hamayim in the Torah. These variations yield the superfluous letters mem, yud, and mem. We add them together. The niskehem, the mem at the end of niskehem, unesachea, just a yud added in to denote the plural, and kamishpatam, the mem at the end, which is a plural object form, which together spells the Hebrew word for water, mayim. The letter yud is represented in unesachea with the letter e, and in mayim with the letter y. Okay, the e is big because you got yud, and mayim is a yud also. Okay, from here, one learns an allusion to the mitzvah of the water libations in the Torah. So a remez, what is a remez here? A remez, the proof offered by Rabbi Yehuda ben Betera is not regarded as absolute, since the method of combining superfluous letters is not included in the hermeneutic principles for the interpretation of the Torah. Nevertheless, this proof provides an allusion to the notion of water libations in the Torah, which is not mentioned explicitly. So the interpretation of disparate letters is similar to the use of secret codes, which are often based on slight textual deviations. This method was used in many places and many generations, especially as a means of highlighting one name in a well-known text. So the sages of the Mishnah and the Talmud found similar allusions for various halachot elsewhere, and they coined the expression, quote, although there is no explicit proof of the matter, there is an allusion to the matter. In other words, although the proof from the text is insufficient to establish the halakha, it is a hint providing support for the established halakha. We continue. Ma'ishna b'sheni d'nakat d'chi remizi lahu bikra b'sheni hu dirmizi. D'chi remizi lahu bikra b'sheni hu dirmizi. Hilkach b'sheni Madkarinan. The Gemara asks the question, what is different about the second day that Rabbi Yehuda ben Betera took it as a day on which one begins to mention rain? The Gemara answers, the reason is that when the verse first alludes to the water libation, it's on the second day of Sukkot that it alludes to, it's on the second day of Sukkot that it alludes to it, Numbers 29. Therefore, on the second day, one begins to mention rain. Rabbi Akiva Omer, Bashishi b'chag hu mazkir, Shneimar Bashishi u'nesacheh, V'shnei nisukhin hakatuv medaber, V'shnei nisukhin hakatuv medaber, echad nisuch hamayim v'echad nisuch hayayin. The Breita stated that Rabbi Akiva says on the sixth day one begins to mention rain. The Gemara explains that this ruling is based on the allusion to the water libation in the offering of this day, as it is stated on the sixth day and its libations, u'nesacheh. The allusion is written in the plural, which indicates that the verse is speaking of two libations, one the water libation, and one is the standard wine libation. So, Emad Tarvaihu de Chamra. Say both of them are talking about wine. Savarle Rabbi Yehuda ben Betera de Amar Remizi Maya. So the Gemara answers that it's not both talking about wine. Rabbi Akiva holds in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda ben Betera, who said that superfluous letters in the verses allude to water. This proves that the additional libations of the sixth day must be a water libation. Now we're turning to DAF Gimel. And here we go. We have very little time, so we're going to read very fast and very clear. Isavar la Rabbi Yehuda ben Betera nema kavate. Kasavar Rabbi Akiva ki kativ nisuch itera b'shishihu dichtiv. The Gemara objects if Rabbi Akiva holds in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda ben Betera with regard to this derivation. Let him say that it is in accordance with his ruling that one begins mentioning rain from the second day of Sukkot, not on the sixth day. The Gemara answers, Rabbi Akiva holds that when the extra reference to the libation is written in the verse, it is with regard to the sixth day that it is written. In other words, it is the plural phrase in its libations, plural, which appears on the sixth day that directly indicates that one must perform more than one libation, while the other two superfluous letters merely serve to teach that the second libation must be of water and not wine. Therefore, the additional libation is performed on the sixth day. Okay, next sugya. Tanya, Rabbi Natan Omer b'kodesh hasech nesek sheichar ladanai b'shnei nisuchin hakatuv medaber echad nisuch hamayim v'echad nisuch hayayin ema torvayu dechamra. Chamra is a yayin. Im kein lichtov kara o hasech hesech o nasech nesech. My hasech nesech shamata mina. So it's taught in the Breita that Rabbi Natan says, in the sanctuary you shall pour out a libation, hasech nesech, of strong drink to the Lord. Numbers 28. The Torah states that the term for libation twice, which indicates that the verse is speaking of two libations. One is the water libation, and the other one is the wine libation. So the Gemara asks the question, why not say that both libations are wine? So the Gemara answers, if so, let the verse write either hasech nesech or nasech nesech, with the same prefix each time. So why does it have a varied formulation, hasech nesech? Learn from this that the one libation is of water and the other one is wine. Ela haditanan nisuch hamayim kol shiva, mani. I Rabbi Yehoshua ne'machad yom. Rabbi Akiva trei yom. I Rabbi Yehuda ben Betera shita yom. The Gemara asks, however, what about that which we learned in a Mishnah, the water libation is performed all 7 days of Sukkot? Who is the author of this Mishnah? If you say it's Rabbi Yeshua, then I say that the ritual is performed only on one day, the 8th day of assembly. If it's Rabbi Akiva, the Mishnah should say it's 2 days, the 6th and the 7th of the festival days. If it is Rabbi Yehuda ben Betera, the Mishnah should say that the water libation is performed on 6 days, from the second day of Sukkot and onward. Le'olam, Rabbi Yehuda ben Beterahi, usvira leka Rabbi Yehuda de matnitin ditnan. Rabbi Yehuda omer, belog haya menasech kol shemona, Umapek Rishon Ume'ayel Shemini. Umapek Rishon Ume'ayel Shemini. The Gemara answers, actually, the ruling of the Mishnah is that Rabbi Yehuda ben Betera, the ruling of Mishnah is Rabbi Yehuda ben Betera. And he holds in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda, as stated in the Mishnah. As we learned in the Mishnah in Sukkot and DAF Nun Zayin Amud Aleph, that Rabbi Yehuda says, and he would pour with a utensil that held a log of water all 8 days of Sukkot, which includes the 8th day of assembly. And Rabbi Yehuda ben Betera removes the first day from this obligation and includes it in the 8th, which results in 7 days of water libations. Umayshna Rishon Delo, Dechi Remizi Mayim Basheni, Dechi Remizi Mayim Basheni Hu Deremizi. Shemini Nami, Ki Remizi Mayim Bashvi'i Hu Deremizi. The Gemara asks, and what is different about the first day? Mai Shana Rishon Delo. What is different about the first day that the water libation is not performed on that day, according to the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda ben Betera? Is the reason that when the Torah alludes to water, it is on the second day that it alludes to this libation? If so, one should not bring the libation on the 8th day either, because when the Torah alludes to water for the last time, it is on the 7th day that it alludes to it. Ela Rabbi Yehudahi. Rabbi Yehudahi de Nisucha Mayim Kol Shiva Hilchata Gemirila. Rather, the Gemara retracts from the previous explanation in favor of the claim that the Mishnah is in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Yehoshua. Did I say Rabbi Yehuda? No, Rabbi Yeshua, not Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Yehoshua. The Mishnah is like Rabbi Yeshua, and Rabbi Yeshua maintains that this ruling that the water libation is performed all 7 days of Sukkot, that's halacha l'Moshe Sinai. It's learned through tradition. That's what it means when it says Hilchata Gemirila. It means it's learned halacha l'Moshe Sinai from a tradition from Moses down to Har Sinai. So let's take a break for a little note. In the sanctuary you shall pour out a libation of strong drink to the Lord. But the citation of this verse as a scriptural allusion to the water libation brought on Sukkot is puzzling. Why? Because it does not revert to Sukkot, but to the morning daily offering. One answer offered by Rabbi Natan is that the verse merely alludes to the general idea of an alternative form of libation, the precise details of which he learns from the allusions in the verse dealing with the offerings of Sukkot. That's the Shita Mukubetzet in the Gurot Ari. So now let's take a break for the halacha. The halacha is like this. A water libation was poured on the altar on each of the 7 days of the festival of Sukkot. This ritual is halacha l'Moshe Sinai. That's from the Rambam Sefer Avodah Hilchot Tmidim Umusafin, chapter 10, halacha 6. Okay. Da Amar Rabbi Ami, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Mishum Rabbi Nechunya ben Akana. Sorry. Da Amar Rabbi Ami, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Mishum Rabbi Nechunya ish bikat bet chortan. Eser netiot arava v'nisuch hamayim halacha l'Moshe Sinai. Whereas Rabbi Ami said that Rabbi Yeshua said in the name of Rabbi Nechunya of the valley of Beit Chortan, the halacha of 10 saplings. This is a special halacha. Eser netiot, the halacha of the 10 saplings. That if there are 10 saplings that require water planted in the area of a Beit Seah, that means 2,500 square cubits, cubit is half a meter, it is permitted to plow the entire field in the summer preceding the sabbatical year, despite the fact that it is prohibited to plow other fields starting from preceding Shavuot. The practice of walking around the altar with a willow and the adorning of the altar with it on Sukkot and taking it on the last day of Sukkot and the obligation of the water libation, each of these three is a halacha l'Moshe Sinai, tradition for Moses. So who is this Rabbi Chanina? Where the plain title Rabbi Chanina is used in the Talmud, the reference is to Rabbi Chanina ben Chama. a first-generation Amora from Eretz Israel. Rabbi Chanina originally came from Babylonia, although he emigrated to Eretz Israel at a relatively early age. He studied under Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, who was very fond of him and even remarked that Rabbi Chanina was not a human being but an angel. Rabbi Chanina also studied Rabbi Yehuda Nasi's preeminent students, especially Rabbi Chia. Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, on his deathbed, designated Rabbi Chanina as the new head of the academy. However, in his great modesty, Rabbi Chanina refused to accept the position as long as his older colleague, Rabbi Ephes, was still alive. Rabbi Chanina lived in Sipori, where he earned a living as a honey dealer. He worked for a living, from which he grew wealthy. He not only worked, but he had a lot of money and established a large academy. He was renowned for his keenness of mind as well as his righteousness and his piety. So numerous halachic and agadic teachings of Rabbi Chanina appear in the Talmud Bavli and the Yerushalmi. He lived a long life, had many students over an extended period, including Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, a disciple colleague, a Talmid Chaver Shalom, and Rabbi Yochanan, who studied with him for many years. So Rabbi Chanina was the son of, had a son, whose name was Rabbi Chama ben Rabbi Chanina. So now, we have 14 minutes left. Let's go. So Rabbi Yehuda Omer Mishum Rabbi Yoshua, Ha'over Lifnei HaTeva B'Yom Tov Ha'acharon Shel Chag Ha'acharon Mazkir, or Rishon Eno Mazkir, B'Yom Tov Rishon Shel Pesach Ha'Rishon Mazkir Ha'achron Eno Mazkir. So Rabbi Yehuda said in the name of Rabbi Yeshua, with regards to the one who passes before the ark as prayer leader on the concluding festival days of Sukkot, the last prayer leader of the Musaf mentions rain, while the first prayer leader of the morning prayer does not mention rain. Conversely, on the first festival day of Passover, the first Shliach Tzibor mentions rain, the last Shliach Tzibor does not mention rain. Hey Rabbi Yeshua, which one is Rabbi Yeshua's statement? Sorry, to which statement of Rabbi Yeshua is Rabbi Yehuda referring to? Ilema Rabbi Yeshua de Matnitin ha'amar beyom tov v'acharon shel chag hu maskir. So if we're talking about Rabbi Yeshua in the Mishnah, this cannot be the case. Because Rabbi Yeshua in our Mishnah said that one begins to mention rain on the last festival day of Sukkot. This indicates that one starts to mention rain from the beginning of the day, meaning from Ma'ariv, evening service. Rabbi Yeshua de Braita ha'amar mishat hanachato. But Rabbi Yeshua in the Braita, Rabbi Yehuda is talking about Rabbi Yeshua in the Braita. However, this too is untenable. You can't say this. Because didn't Rabbi Yeshua say that the one who begins to mention rain for the first time puts down the lulav from the end of the second day of Sukkot? From the end of the seventh day of Sukkot, sorry. This statement also indicates that one begins to mention rain from the evening service of the eighth day of assembly. V'tu hadatanya Rabbi Yehuda Omer mishum Rabbi ben Betera ha'over lifnei hateva b'yom tov acharon shel chag acharon mazkir. He ben Betera ilema Rabbi Yehuda ben Betera ha'amar b'sheni b'chag hu mazkir. So the Gemara asks another question. And furthermore, that which is taught in a Braita that Rabbi Yehuda said in the name of Ben Betera, with regard to the one who, the prayer leader on the concluding festival of Sukkot, the eighth day of the assembly, the last Shliach Tzibor mentions rain. To which halachot of Ben Betera is Rabbi Yehuda referring to? If we say it's referring to the ruling of Rabbi Yehuda Ben Betera, it cannot be the case, as he said that one begins to mention rain on the second day of Sukkot. Amar Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak Tehei Rabbi Yoshua ben Betera Zimnin de Karele Bishmei v'Zimnin de Karele Bishmei de Abba V'ha Makame de Lismachuhu V'ha Levatar de Lismachuhu. So Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak said, let the Ben Betera mentioned in Rabbi Yehuda in the Braita be understood as a reference to Rabbi Yeshua Ben Betera. And this will resolve all the above difficulties. At times, Rabbi Yehuda calls him by his name, Rabbi Yeshua, despite the fact that the name Rabbi Yeshua generally refers to Rabbi Yeshua ben Hanania. At other times, Rabbi Yehuda calls him by his father's name, such as in the second Breita, where his ruling is attributed to Ben Betera. And the Gemara explains that the reason for the different names, this Breita, where he is called by his father's name, was written before he was ordained, and this Breita, where he is called simply Rabbi Yeshua, was after he was ordained. So, with ordination, a very young scholar or one with a special status is regularly referred to as the son of so-and-so. But in certain cases, the use of a father's name for a person of status is often considered degrading. If you look in the first book of Samuel, chapter 20, verse 27, you will find an example of this. However, those sages who did not receive the title of rabbi would often be referred to in this manner, like Ben Azai and Ben Zoma. Next sugya, Tana betal uvruchot lo chivu chachamim lazkir. Betal uvruchot lo chivu chachamim lazkir. Ve'in ba lazkir mazkir. My timer. Amar Rabbi Chanina lefi she'en ne'atzarin. This is taught in another Breita. It's taught in another Breita. Taught when it says Tana, it's a term used to indicate a quotation from a Breita. Usually the Breita introduced by this expression are very short, 1 or 2 sentences at most, and they clarify or supplement or qualify the statements of the Mishnah. So it is taught in another Breita with regard to dew and with regard to the wind, that the sages did not obligate one to mention them by reciting. He makes the wind blow and the dew fall in the second blessing of Amida, but if one seeks to mention them, he may mention them. The Gemara asks, what is the reason that this recitation is optional? Rabbi Chanina said, because winds and dew are consistent and not withheld. Tal minalan delo mi'atzar. Why is there always dew? Diktiv vayomer Eliyahu atishpi mitshave Gilad mitoshve Gilad el Achav Chai Hashem Elohei Yisrael asher amadti lefanav im yeh hashanim ha'ele tal umatar ki im lefi devari. Uketiv lech hera'eh el Achav ve'etna matar al pnei adama. V'ilutal lo kamar le, my timer, mishum delo mi'atzar. V'ki me'achar delo mi'atzar Eliyahu ishtabu'e lamali. Hachi kamar le. Hachi kamar le, afilu tal beracha nami lo ate, v'li hadre l'tal divracha. Mishum delo minkara milta. The Gemara explains, as dew, from where do we derive that it is not withheld? As it is written in Elisha the Tishbite, who is the settlers of Gilad, said to Achab, and the Lord, the God of Israel, lives before whom I stand. As the Lord of the God of Israel lives before whom I stand, there shall be no dew or rain in these years, but according to my word. That's in 1 Kings chapter 17. As it is written, go show yourself before Achav, and I will send rain upon the land. 1 Kings chapter 18. God stated that he will resume rainfall, whereas he did not say to Elijah that he will restore the dew. What is the reason? Because dew is not withheld, and therefore dew is not withheld, and therefore it continued even during a time of drought. So the Gemara asked, and since dew is not withheld, why did Elisha swear that there would be no dew as well as no rain? So the Gemara explains that this is what Elisha said to Achab. Not only will there be no rainfall, but even the dew of the blessing, which helps crops grow, will not come. This prediction was indeed fulfilled. The Gemara asks, but if so, let God restore the dew of blessing when he ended the drought of rain. And in the aforementioned verse, the Gemara asks, but if so, let God restore the dew of blessing when he ended the drought of rain in the aforementioned verse. So the Gemara answers, this was not necessary because the matter is not recognizable. That is, people cannot distinguish between dew of blessing and the regular dew, which is always present. Ela ruchot menalan delo miatzri. Amar Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi da Amar Kara ki ka'arba ruchot hashamayim perashti etchem neum Adonai. Arba ruchot shemaim perasti etchem neum Hashem. Micah amar le, ilem hachi kamar lahu, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, LeYisrael. Divadartinchu ba'arba ruche de alma. Ihache ka'arba ba'arba mibaya. Why is it ka'arba? Ba'arba mibaya. Le. Elahachi kamar keshem she'iyavshar le'olam below ruchot kach yavshar le'olam below Yisrael. The Gemara asks, however, with regards to winds, from where do we derive that it is not withheld but perpetually blows? Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi said that the verse states, "For I have spread you abroad as the four winds of the heavens," says the Lord in Zechariah chapter 2. He clarifies, what is God saying to them? If you were saying that the Holy One, blessed be He, is saying to the Jewish people, I have scattered you to the four winds of the world. If so, why did you say as the four winds? You should have said to the four winds. Rather, this is what God is saying. Just as the world cannot exist without winds, so it exists without the Jewish people. Amar Rabbi Chanina, Hilkach b'motachama amar mashiva ruach ve'en machzirin oto. Amar morida geshem machzirin oto. B'mot geshamim lo amar mashiva ruach en machzirin oto. Lo amar morida geshem machzirin oto. V'lo od ela afilu amar ma'avir ruach mafriach hatal. And machzirinoto. Tana. Let's translate that. Rabbi Chanina said, since wind and dew are always present, if during the summer one recited he makes the wind blow, we do not require him to return and repeat the blessing, since the wind blows during the summer as well. However, if one recited during the summer he makes the rainfall, we require him to return and repeat the blessing, because rain in the summer is a curse. And then conversely, in the rainy season, if one did not recite, he makes the wind blow, we do not require him to return to the blessing, because the wind blows regardless. If one did not recite, he makes the rainfall, we require him to return and repeat the blessing. Not only that, but even if one mistakenly recited, he removes the wind and lifts the dew, that there should be no wind or dew, meaning we do not require him to return and repeat the blessing, because the wind and the dew are always present. Tana. Ba'avim uveruchot lo chiyavu chachamim lazkir, v'im ba lazkir mazkir. My taima mishum dela mi atzri. It was taught in the Breita that we're talking about clouds and wind. The sages did not obligate one to mention them, but if one wants to mention them, he may mention them. So why is that? Because the Gemara answers, because clouds and winds are constant and not withheld. Let's quickly read the halacha. During the summer months, when recited, he makes the wind blow. It says, Bimot achama amar mashiva ruach. In the second blessing of the Amida prayer during the summer, one recites, he makes the wind blow without mentioning rain. Or if one fails to mention the winds during the rainy season, one is not required to start from the beginning and repeat the blessing. If during the summer one recites, he makes the rainfall, one is required to return to the beginning of the blessing. And if he has already completed the blessing, he must return to the beginning of the Amida. This mistake must be corrected, even if one recited the prayer in a place where rain is required during the summer months, and even if he mentions both dew and rain. That's the Ramah. The authorities disagree about whether he must also repeat the introductory verse in the Amida, Adonai Sfatai Tiftach Ufia Gidilatecha in Psalm 51. If during the rainy season one fails to mention he makes the rainfall, he's required to return to the beginning of the Amida, provided that he does not mention dew. However, if he mentioned dew, he is not required to return and correct the mistake, and that's according to the Yerushalmi. We continue now. Okay, we have 1 minute, and we're going to come very close to the end of the daf. V'lo mi'atzre v'hani Rabbi Yosef atzarat hashamayim min ha'avim u'min ha'ruchot. Ata omer min ha'avim u'min ha'ruchot, o enu ela min ha'matar. Kashu omer d'lo Ye matar hari matar amor. V'hama ani makayam v'atzarat hashamayim min ha'avim u'min ha'ruchot. So the Gemara asks, and are they not withheld? But didn't Rav Yosef teach a bright on the verse, and he will close up the heavens? Meaning God will stop up the heavens from clouds and from the winds? Didn't you say close up the heavens means from the clouds and from the winds? Or perhaps it's only referring to the absence of rainfall. When it says so that there will be no rain, rain is also already mentioned explicitly. How then do I uphold the meaning of the verse, and he will close up the heavens? This must mean from the clouds and from the winds. Kasha ruchot aruchot. Kasha avim avim. Kasha ruchot aruchot. Kasha avim alavim. Avim lo kasha. ha b'charpe, ha ba'afle. The Gemara summarizes the question. This is difficult due to the contradiction between the statements of the wind in the first Breita and the statements about the wind in the second Breita. And it's similarly difficult due to the contradiction between the statement about clouds in the first Breita and the statement about clouds in the second Breita. The Gemara answers, the contradiction between one statement about the clouds and the other statement about the clouds is not difficult, as this first Breita is talking about the early clouds before the rain, which comes whether or not the rain actually falls. Whereas the second Breita is referring to late clouds, which materialize after the rainfall. Those late clouds are sometimes withheld by God as a punishment. And we just finish up by saying, Ruchot lokasha, ha beruach mitzuya, ha beruach she'ena mitzuya. Ruach she'ena mitzuya, chazya levedare. Efshar benafvata. Likewise, the contradiction between the first statement about the wind and the second statement about the wind is not difficult, as the first Breita is referring to a typical wind which is never withheld, and the second Breita is referring to an atypical wind which may be withheld. So the Gemara asks, an atypical wind is fit for winnowing grain on the threshing floor. Since this wind is also necessary, one should pray for it as well. So the Gemara answers, since it is possible to winnow grain with sieves when there's no wind, there is no great need for these winds. Okay, we're going to stop here. B'ezrat Hashem, we're going to start this place tomorrow. Have a good day.